This next one is a somewhat recent read, but it is an important one. And this one I have given the title of Most Inclusive Novel of the Year. That, of course, goes to Borderline by Michelle Baker. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this book, and I've actually read the second one in the series already. And you've probably heard me talk about that a little at this point. Borderline is everything you would want in regards to an inclusive novel. Now, this is slowly getting better, guys, but basically when I talk about an inclusive novel, I'm talking about a book that has representation of those who are not normally represented. In this case, actually, it's a major plot point that every character in Borderline suffers from some sort of mental illness, and most of them also have some sort of physical disability. The main character absolutely included. This is a woman that she is a failed film student, and due to a relationship gone bad with one of her professors, she attempts to commit suicide. She jumps off a building and she survives, but at the cost of both of her legs. She suffers from memory loss, and she was born with borderline disorder, which essentially she has major issues controlling her mood swings. She can go from super happy to super angry at the flip of a switch, and this lady just has so many things that could hold her back. And at the beginning of the book, when we meet her, they absolutely do hold her back. She has fallen into this depressive state, and it does not look like she's coming out of it anytime soon. But then she meets a woman who offers her a job opportunity that turns out to be something way, way different than she possibly could have expected. And I'm going to leave it at that. So, this book has representation for those in the LGBTQ plus community. It has representation for those with mental illness and mental disability. It has the representation for those with physical disability. It has representation for those of other races. And basically, this is the most inclusive book I think I've ever read. And what's so brilliant about it is that it is written in a way where none of that feels forced. And that's what's so wonderful. None of it feels forced. All of it is genuinely necessary for the story. And it's a great story. I have described it before this way. I will describe it again. This is Men in Black, but with fairies instead of aliens. And I will leave it at that. If that interests you, if the other things I've said interest you, pick up Borderline by Michelle Baker. It's part of a trilogy. I've read the second one. The second one is also great, and I'm looking forward to getting to the third. Alright, now, this was a tough one for me. This is Best Fantasy of the Year. And it was not tough because I read an inordinately large amount of fantasy. It was tough because this book was my absolute favorite fantasy I read, and later books in the series, they did awful things for me. But some of you may have figured out the book I'm talking about is Magic's Pawn by Mercedes Lackey. Now, this is part of a trilogy. This is a really, really great fantasy novel, and a really, really great start to the trilogy. Now, what's great about this book is that it can be read as a standalone if you so choose. And I almost want to suggest that to you folks who are interested in it. Now, this book came out in 1991, so it is officially over 30 years old. And what's interesting about it is that we have a main character who does not follow the usual fantasy tropes. He is not some overpowered youngin who is out to fulfill a destiny. He is not a boy who ends up in an internship and suddenly gains incredible powers and just rises from the ashes. He is not a boy that people cheer for and that they are on his side whatsoever. This book starts out with this boy basically getting his butt kicked in a practice match and getting his arm severely broken by the man who is supposed to be training him because that man loathes him. The main character of these books, Vaniel, he does all the things that we do. He cries constantly because he is lonely, because he is hated, because he is mistreated. He is, for all intents and purposes, a very weak person physically and kind of mentally at this point. He has been broken down through the years, and the only thing that he loves is music. And even that fails him. And I know I'm making it sound like such a depressing read, but guys, there's something magical about Magic Spawn. Because Vaniel is such a unique character in the realm of fantasy, he's kind of everything that we're told heroes are not. And yet he becomes something incredible. And I would definitely suggest picking up the first one. I would suggest even picking up the second one because the second one is awesome. The third is what really just broke my heart, and not necessarily in a good way. But that said, Mercedes Lackey is a heck of an author. This is a heck of a book, and I would suggest it to anyone that is interested in fantasy that is not about hulking, massively muscled guys who can take down a dragon with a couple swings of a sword. Alright, this next one is Best Classic. Now, when I say classic here, I've kind of stretched the rules a little because, dang it, Jane Austen, you can't win every time. So, instead, I'm going with classic, meaning any book that is older than my dear mother. And I don't know how she's going to take that, so if you don't see me after this video, it's because she took it poorly instead of in a humorous way, and, well, I'll miss you all. If, however, I'm still around, then hopefully we'll be able to talk more about books. But, best classic in this regard, any book that is older than my mother. Now, my mother was born in '69, which is not old by any means, but this next book came out a full 10 years before her, so I feel that it is justified because it has surpassed the 50-year mark, and it is still a novel that can be picked up by anyone today and still creep them out. Psycho from Robert Bloch. Now, I made it a point not to have any books on here that I've read previously. I feel that it's cheating, you know? Yeah, this was my first read of Robert Bloch's Psycho. And despite, of course, having seen the Alfred Hitchcock movie, despite watching other adaptations of it, this was still a really great read. Just very impressive, and I can absolutely see why it became such a sensation. And that age thing is important here because you have to remember this book came out very soon after Ed Gein's reign of terror ended, and the whole sensationalist news story and everything was coming out about that. That really should put things in perspective, okay? We are well before Jeffrey Dahmer. We're before Richard Ramirez. So is it really any wonder that people read Psycho and they freaked out? It's a freaky book, you know? And what was really cool to me was that despite seeing the movie, despite seeing other adaptations, the book was still different and the book was still better. This is my absolute favorite way to experience Psycho. I can say that now wholeheartedly. For anyone out there who has not read this book, find yourself a copy, even if you've watched the movies, even if you've seen the shows, because the book is better. Alright, for this next one, the category is Best Alternate History. Now, I didn't have many of those books, but surprisingly I probably had a good 6 or 7 books this year where timelines were skewed in some way, or history was changed in some way. But easily, hands down, the one that takes it for this year is The Bargain by John Rudy. First of all, great cover, of course. I've shown this off before. I've talked about it a couple times on here. I've encouraged you guys to pick it up. I think some of you have, but I don't know who's actually read it yet. No one has reached out to me to say, hey, I read it and it was awesome, or hey, I read it, what the heck are you talking about? But this book, it really surprised me. I thought I was going to get some sort of cheesy, awful, you know, kind of 80s fight, Hitler versus Dracula. And instead, I got a very accurate portrayal of World War II era and some really interesting explanations behind some of the strangest moves that Adolf Hitler made during the war. Now, for those that are history buffs in any way, you know that for quite a while there, Adolf Hitler, he was, I hate to admit it, but he was kind of winning. He had the opportunity to come out on top on multiple occasions, but he made a couple really strange decisions that ultimately ended up costing him some major battles and pushed things back just enough that help was able to get in there and that we were able to take this guy down. Sort of. But those things, they're true, they're accurate. They actually happened, and we don't know why. We don't know why he made those decisions in these particular battles or during these particular times. But The Bargain has great explanations for you because, as The Bargain will tell you, the Germans kind of ticked off Dracula. And that was a huge mistake. Now, Dracula, he did not come out swinging like a madman, just killing and sucking blood from anyone around him. No, Dracula decides that he's going to go about this in an entirely different way. He kind of starts sabotaging the Germans by sending seductors out into their ranks. These women then bite the generals, bite the lieutenants, bite the guys that are on top, and slowly bring them in under their control. Like I said, I thought I was going to get something cheesy and crazy and outlandish, and it wasn't. It was actually historically accurate, but with some pretty crazy ideas of why some decisions were made that didn't really make sense in reality, and it explains it very well. Hitler himself never actually comes up. He is all behind the scenes. Dracula is actually mostly behind the scenes. And this was just a killer novel. This could have won in a couple different categories this year, but as far as alternate histories, this had to take it. Alright, we are now on to the category of Best Comeback. Now, this could have gone to a novel that started out really weak but got better as it went on, or in this case it went to an author who I was ready to count out. He already had 2 strikes against him, and I thought this was going to be the third swing and a miss that sent him out of the game. But he surprised the heck out of me, hit a home run, and delivered with one of the most enjoyable novels that I read this year. That is James A. Moore, with Deeper. Now, as I said, I have tried some James A. Moore books before. They just didn't do it for me. This is one that I've wanted to read for a while. Honestly, at first, it was because I didn't have any experience with him. But as I read his books and didn't like him, and as I read his books and didn't like him, I finally said, you know what, Deeper is going to be the last one, and I'm only giving it a chance because it has a really cool cover. Now, based on this really cool cover, I figured that I was getting undersea monster. People go diving, they find something in the caves, it's terrifying, it's horrifying, it's a scary sea serpent monster hybrid creature thing, yada yada yada. No, it wasn't any of that. This was one of the few modern, actually truly modern takes on one of the most timeless Lovecraftian creatures. Picture, if you will, Dagon and his descendants making their way onto this massive cruise liner ship, being blasted away by guns, pulling people into the water, ripping them apart. I mean, it's an absolute gore fest. But somehow it still pays homage to Lovecraft. And that's what I got with Deeper. I had no idea that's what I was going to get. So out of nowhere, James A. Moore comes out, kicks my butt with this book, and now I really want to pick up more by him and give him another chance, because there's got to be something else out there that he wrote that ends up like Deeper, where, yeah, the writing might not be the greatest. Yeah, some of the dialogue is really cheesy, but man, this book was such a freaking blast to read. And for that reason, James A. Moore is the comeback kid of the year. Now, on a very different note, we're going to get into best children's or younger readers of the year. And this one was also a very easy read for me. It is an author that I have fallen in love with this year. Everything I have read so far has been great, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. But out of the books that I read this year from this particular author, the one that is the absolute best, hands down, is There's Something Out There by P.J. Knight. Now, this is part of the Creepover series. It is another one that is kind of taking the old Goosebumps style and bringing it back, which I'm super excited to see. There are quite a few of these happening right now, and it's awesome. It's awesome. Kids need to be reading horror. That's just my opinion, and I like to think that my opinion matters every now and then. In this case, I hope it does, because I hope to write some of that children's fiction and bring some of them into the horror realm later on in my writing career. But for now, we have awesome authors like P.J. Knight, who is doing an excellent job. I think I read 5 or 6 of these Creepover books last year, and I have quite a few more sitting on my shelf ready for me to get to this year. But of the ones that I read, There's Something Out There was the absolute best. This is a book that it does everything right. This is a book that pushes the boundaries of what younger kids honestly can handle in horror. But I say that in a good way. This is something that I think an adult can read, still be creeped out. Something that you can read with a child and get them into it if they like the spooky stuff. And what was really cool is this particular one takes an old Native American legend and makes it something new. And it's one of those books that really creeps up on you, because the monster has very little to do with the book. Most of the horror is just the inevitability, knowing what's going to happen, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And that's what makes this terrifying, both for children and adults. Alright, the next category is Best Monster. So, who took the classic monsters that we know and love and made something with it that I enjoyed the most. And this was an easy one for me, The Forsaken Boy by Troy Tradup. So you guys, of course, have heard me talk about this. I just did a review not long ago, kind of an impromptu review in my wrap-up. And if you watched that, then you know I said that this is one of the best werewolf novels that I've read in a long time. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not just saying that because Troy is probably watching this video, although I think it's super cool that I know guys like him who can write this kind of material. So, The Forsaken Boy is, as I said, a werewolf novel. It is about a young man who is not entirely Native American, not entirely white, but kind of shunned by both sectors, if you will. He is a boy who is bullied relentlessly. He is a boy who has endured hardship time and time and time again, and knows that that's just the way his life is going to be. And it sucks. It really sucks, because somewhere underneath the facade that he puts on, you know that there could be something incredible, but this kid just doesn't get a chance, period. And then one night he has a very interesting encounter with a wolf, and things start to change for him from there. The Forsaken Boy is a great werewolf novel for a few particular reasons. Now, the actual werewolf part, it doesn't do much that's new. It pretty much follows the same kind of staple werewolf that we know and love. But this is more about the character. This is about not redemption, certainly not redemption, but more revenge. This is one of those novels where we are cheering for the werewolf as he tears the throat out of someone. And that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to write convincingly, but Troy does that here in The Forsaken Boy. And that's part of what makes this one of my favorite werewolf novels now, one of the best that I've read. The other reasons being that it just felt very real. The portrayal of the characters, the way that they interact, the things that they hide. It had that small town feel that we all know and love. His humor, although very dark at times, you can't help but enjoy this book. So for anyone looking for a good werewolf novel, if you haven't experienced one for a while, I highly suggest that you go on Amazon and pick up The Forsaken Boy. Awesome book. It doesn't do a lot to change the werewolf character that we know and love, but it does a lot to make us feel for that character and even cheer him on when he is at his worst. And that will wrap up yet another one. I am enjoying the heck out of this, and I really hope you guys are too. So stay safe, guys. Have a great week. Cheers.